Welcome all in, everybody, to another edition of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. That's Thomas Dunn. And we had a pretty interesting slate of games over the weekend on Saturday. We previewed them that morning. We'll get into Seattle U and St. Mary's and what happened there. We'll get into the 3-1 Washington State Cougars and 3-1 USF Dons, which kind of is maybe one of the more surprising notes of the weekend. We'll get into the forecast for the Thursday matchups this week. And we do have Washington State head coach David Riley, who's going to come on, and we will share that interview as they're getting ready to take on both Gonzaga and St. Mary's in the next week and a half. So big happenings for the Cougs this coming week. But we're going to start with, well, the three undefeateds. We have three undefeated teams still in the WCC: Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and Santa Clara. And each of them have kind of done it in their own ways. Gonzaga has had their ups and downs. St. Mary's had a close one against LMU and has kind of handled their business the rest of the way. Santa Clara, some dominant performances. But who's been the most impressive of this group? And Thomas, I know I have mine kind of queued of who I think, and who do you think has kind of been the most impressive of this group through the first four games?
So I'm going to start with those words that you just finished with, because if this was asking about the scope of the season, I think the easy answer would be Gonzaga, and there'd be no ifs, ands, or buts or questions about it. But for the last few games, end of USD was not great. The Seattle U game, they were on the back foot for quite a bit of it. Had a rough start against LMU before absolutely suffocating them and dragging them into the mud and not letting them get up. So that was a good response along that front, but still had to get down double digits. I know there was some rotational things and questions with Graham EK in terms of what's happening there. So for me, and just for now, obviously just through this scope of first four games, I'll give it to St. Mary's. I think they've been taking care of their business a little bit more pristine and a little bit more efficiently that the Zags have to this point. And I know St. Mary's had their own struggles with LMU and had to win at the death thanks to Rory Hawk. But I think in that scope of four total games, I think St. Mary's has done more of what they wanted to do for the bulk of those four games compared to what Gonzaga has done. And that gap is not huge by any stretch of the imagination. I think that the same holds true for Santa Clara. They've done well in three of their four games in terms of getting out on the front foot and getting out early, not really letting teams stick around for all that long, really the only exception being Portland. So it's a pretty tight gap between those three in terms of what they've done. But at least for me, the one team that sticks out among that sample size is the Gales.
I mean, I was almost going to say St. Mary's because of the way that they have played overall through the first four games. But I think, again, when I think about the way I look at each of these squads and the expectations that each of them carry, honestly, I think it's like, for me, it's Santa Clara because they were able to avoid some of the pitfalls. They were able to avoid the speed bumps, which seemingly some of these games might have been. The fact that they went up to Portland, and yes, maybe it took a Timo George injury to get them by the Pilots, but they did. They were neck and they couldn't shake Pepperdine quite all the way in that game, but they finally did it toward the end. They just boat raced San Diego. They boat raced Oregon State on the road. The fact that they were able to they handled their business against the teams that they should beat and should take care of, I think is an impressive part of what we've seen from Santa Clara. And especially after coming off the Loyola loss, which is not encompassed in when we're talking about how impressive they have been. This is, I think, been a really positive turnaround for Santa Clara and what we've seen to this point. Now, I will say, and my caveat here is when I think about individual game performance, which has been the most impressive, I think that is St. Mary's over Seattle U, because of the way that game ended up kind of filtering out. This was a 5-point game, 4-point game late into this one. Seattle U led at the half, played a really good game. Again, coming off the game against Gonzaga, where they had Gonzaga on the ropes and could have won it in regulation before it got to overtime, and the Zags pulled away. St. Mary's was able to pull away late in this one. I mean, this was a 5-point game with about 5 minutes left, and then St. Mary's finished it off on an 18-5 run in the last 442. They really separated themselves from the Red Hawks in that one. I mean, Palace Morauskas was incredible, 30 and 15. Dylan Shaw, career high 20 in that game. Like he did a bit of everything. 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He was all over the place. Had the half court heave that went in as well. So some highlight reel stuff for the freshman. And Harry Wessel's 15 points in that one. Another like really the best performance he's had all year. I think individual game, like it's St. Mary's with that Seattle U win, because again, like this is a Seattle U team that has done everything I think you could have asked them to do through the first 2 weeks in the WCC, and no one was going to expect them to kind of walk out of either Spokane or Moraga with a win. But the fact that they really were put both of those teams on their heels and made them fight for both of those wins, I think says a lot about what Seattle U's done. But I mean, St. Mary's best individual performance, Santa Clara, I think the best. They've been the most impressive to me because of what we have seen in the past from this team and where we have seen them fail in the past, and they did not do that. And I think that's one of the more important things going 4-0. That's puts them in good position as they head into Gonzaga later this week.
And I kind of want to look at all three of those teams and break them down just a little bit more. And like you mentioned, for the Broncos, not falling flat on their face. That was really what you want out of these first 4 games. They avoided that. They escaped at Portland and then did enough across the other 3 games. I think probably the single most impressive performance they've had of the season when they went out to Corvallis and maced Oregon State into the ground. And I think lots of other guys are starting to step up and just do a little bit more. I think Cherry Darlin has really turned the corner after some struggles in non-conference play, and I think that can really pay dividends down the line for Santa Clara. And can he continue to do that? Can he now, what's he going to do in a big time environment this upcoming week in the kennel? I think that's going to be an essential question. If the Broncos, they're going to need as many guys to step up as possible. And I think Darlin's got to be chief among them on that list for guys who need to do more than what their averages tell them. So Santa Clara, I like what they've done. They've done what they needed to do in the manner in which they need to do it. And even so much so against San Diego, we were all witnesses to the Brendan Yarusso show for 1 minute of the game, 8 points as the preferred walk-on. It's been a long road in his season to this point, but it was good to see him get out there and do that. For the Gales, I like the fact that they did what they needed to do against Seattle U. I do think it's a double-edged sword though in terms of that, because you think of the circumstances surrounding that and think of any team having to face St. Mary's on a less than 48-hour turnaround after playing Gonzaga. Like we all know it. Like that is as hellacious as it gets. And I posed that question in our unofficial WCC live this past weekend. Like, how much would they have left in the tank? First half, great. Most of the second half, solid. And then it just fell off a cliff. And that's no fault of the Red Hawks. It really isn't. But it's just a matter of circumstance. And I do think it's important to put that out there, because while acknowledging that the Gales did do that and got on the front foot and took advantage of those circumstances, and they had to still go out and do their part of it, the Red Hawks did. Their backs were against the wall. And, we talk about what they need to do they need to not lose that home game against USF. That's going to be one that I think bites them just a little bit going forward, especially when we get towards seeding time in the conference tournament. That's probably the one game that they're going to want back more than anything. I know they had a lot of chances to close out the Zags, but that's the one that really, in the grand scheme of things, that's what gets amplified when you do give away those games against the Zags and the Gales. And speaking of those Spokanites in Gonzaga, I think the reason why we're so difficult on them, at least just for this specific portion, is it's expectation. Like, you're a national championship contender with the way you've played in the non-conference and the way you've carried yourself year over year. So when you're screwing around with USD, when you're on the back foot at home against Seattle U, when you come out flat against LMU, you have to be held to that standard. It's not, they've won the championship before, so therefore they're allowed to coast their way through the season. We'll catch them in the NCAA tournament. No, you have to be held to the standard of trying to achieve that national championship. And it's very easy for me to sit here and put the comparison of what Michigan's doing right now, but I won't necessarily do that. But I just think in general, in terms of the process that you want, championship habits are every day. Really, you can't take a week off. And Gonzaga they need to do a lot better in terms of dusting themselves and making sure that they're on their P's and Q's more than anything. It's not that they can't play. It's just they've just been a little bit off kilter over this last week or so, and relative to the expectation, they're not meeting it. And I know the fan base has known it. I've seen it online. The coaches know it. Mark Few has been very adamant that they need to be better if they're going to achieve what they need to achieve up in March. And I think they're going to have a good chance to get themselves back on the right track, and it'll be a good a good game potentially between the Zags and the Broncos coming up.
Yeah, the defense showed back up, and I think that's the biggest difference. Like the offense for the Zags is always going to be there. It's whether or not the defensive intensity was there, and that was lacking against San Diego. You could say it was lacking against Seattle U for most of that game, but I think that was also partly just like how Seattle U game planned, and they did a really good job of that. But LM, like they were they were playing pretty well against LMU, and then just absolutely suffocated them the rest of that game. After I think it was like the under 8 timeout in the first half, where neither of them were really shooting all that well anyway, and then the Zags really just kind of put their foot on the neck and just made sure that that was not going to be a factor at all in that matchup. And now we talk about like Seattle U, because this team, this like they are not they're 1-3, and like I feel like this is not a team that reads as a 1-3 team when you look at their record, whatnot, especially when you think about who they've had to play early on. They've now their first 4 games in WCC play, the league record of those 4 teams right now is 14-2. Oh, they have to play the top 4 teams in the WCC, at least record wise right now, and they're 1-3. And of course, Zags, Gales, you knew that was probably going to be the case. You're right. The USF one is going to be the one that stings. But you know what? It's like this was good, always going to be a tough stretch. They're way better than that record would indicate. And at the very least, the schedule starts to get a little softer now. Like they're past kind of like the heavy lift component. I mean, the next 8 games at Oregon State, San Diego. Yes, they get Gonzaga again at Climate Pledge, LMU at Pacific, at Washington State, Pepperdine, and then at Portland. It feels like that they should probably be the favorite in 6 of the next 8. When you look at that stretch, take out Gonzaga, maybe take out the, I don't know if you want to go either the Washington State game or LMU, one or the two, like just kind of leave room for to be conservative on that front. But this is a team that probably should be the favorites in most of those matchups, so they can climb back in to the WCC race.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and I think the one thing I want to kind of see how it gets answered over the course of that time is we talk about the wear and tear over the course of the season, and you think of, yes, you just got through a very hard stretch of games, including that loss to USF and including that stretch against Gonzaga and St. Mary's. But for Seattle U, what I'm looking for is how much do you let that kind of simmer, or how much do you let it dawn on you? How much can they move on to the next game? I think that for me is a question not that they can't do it, but we just haven't seen it answered yet. So how does a season translate in the WAC versus a season that translates in the WCC? I think that's something that you're going to want to see answered over the course of time, because we talk about, for so many different teams, including Santa Clara, USF, among others, it's, can you take care of business when you're expected to? And this is a stretch where Seattle U, even with that 1-3 record, anybody who watches that team knows they're not a 1-3 team right now in terms of skill level. You just have to watch ball to know that. And this is now a stretch of games where you're expected to go out and win. And I expect the Red Hawks to go do that. Now, if they don't, we'll raise some questions as to why they aren't. But from what the scope of what they showed, from the example and body of work that they've shown over the course of the season, and even in these 4 games where they did end up 1-3 at the end of the day, I'm confident that they can do it. But it does raise the question of how much does the wear and tear of the WCC kind of take effect over the course of time.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about them as we get to the kind of the previews of what we're going to see the rest of this week. But let's dive into the interview that we were able to get. Washington State head coach David Riley, his 3-1 Cougars, coming into a week where they will play Gonzaga, or they will play St. Mary's and then Gonzaga next week. What's been working, what hasn't been working, and what do the Cougs still need to work on as we get deeper and deeper into conference play? All right, I'm happy to be joined by Washington State head coach David Riley. The Cougars are 5-1 in their last 6 games, have started conference play 3-1. Coach, just kind of talk about it seems like the difference that the team has had over the last 6 games, because it feels like roles have started to kind of be solidified. Guys are starting to kind of find where they're supposed to be. And it does seem like there's a significant difference. And obviously, you had a really tough non-conference schedule. There's no way kind of around that. Just the opponents you had coming through, it took some time for them to gel, but it seems like it's now starting to kind of turn the corner a bit for you guys.
Yeah, I think our guys have done a good job of just focusing on getting better and trusting the process. We lost our 6 leading scorers last year, um, and we always want to challenge ourselves in a tough preseason. And so when you kind of look at the strength of schedule, we were I think it was Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and us in the non-conference, and we had some games that we were right there. We weren't able to pull off, and part of that's just getting experience, and you gotta kind of learn how to lose before you can win, and that's what we went through with these new guys, and I think it's great to see them having success now to where they're turning that corner and playing better and playing more together offensively and more connected defensively as well.
I mean, early on in conference play, we started to see like we can look at some of the stats of like you guys have rebounded pretty well early on in the first part of conference play, especially on the offensive end. You've gotten a lot of second chance opportunities, shooting a lot better. And I mean, one of the guys that seems to kind of be jumping out, or at least has kind of stepped up his game since WCC play started, is Jerome Morton, and just kind of how like he has seemed to kind of find his footing and get going in the last few weeks.
Yeah, Jerome's been playing a lot more confident and giving us a huge spark defensively, and really just kind of playing how we saw him practice all fall. And when I was first started coaching, and I was talking to my old boss about Rick Majerus, his line was, it always takes transfers and junior college guys half a season to get acclimated to this, and I really think with some of these transfers that have come in and they're learning the system, and it takes about a half year to really understand what that looks like and how to play confidently through it. And Jerome's one of those guys that you can just see him playing with a different energy, where he's not thinking about everything right now, and really stepped up the last couple games and been great for us.
I mean, like the guard spot has been kind of almost like a really interesting kind of grouping for you guys because it took Jerome a little bit longer. And one of the guys that almost kind of seemed to hit the ground running was Ace Glass. I mean, coming in as a freshman and really kind of like showing what he was capable of doing so early on. How quickly did he kind of gain your trust to kind of be able to throw him in there? Because we saw him have some great games at the Maui. He's continued to have good games here in conference play. Obviously, he hit that the runner, the game winner against LMU the last week, and just kind of talk about like the maturation that he's had, because he has really been able to hit the ground running for you guys.
Yeah, he's someone that's been really impressive just with his ability to um, grow from his mistakes. And as a freshman coming in, you don't know what you don't know, and he every game has taken huge strides, and kind of came onto the scene in that Maui Invitational when he had 40 versus Arizona State, and then he had a whole new set of challenges coming in as the top of the scouting report, and learning how to attack the game that way. And it's just been fun to coach him and see him grow, and he's one of the best or scorers that I've coached, and just having him develop into finding his spots and when to score, when to facilitate. He's getting better and better every day.
Now, one of the things that we talked about a little bit about how you kind of have to learn how to lose before you learn how to win. You've had some close games in conference play. The game against LMU, you had to come back against Portland, and then kind of adjusting. You jumped on Oregon State early, where you kind of had to play catch up in those other two games. Kind of what's been the difference in the preparation from the guys, and not necessarily on maybe also on a coaching front, but what's been different as you've kind of seen this group be able to pull through those late game situations and then kind of learn from their mistakes of getting a good start early against Oregon State just last night.
Yeah, I think a lot of those lessons were learned in the preseason. Like we were close to withstanding some big runs from teams like USC and Seton Hall and UW, and playing these big time games. We got our foundation kind of exposed, and okay, here's where we missed out on making that run to come back, or whatever that looked like. And I think just learning from those mistakes really helped us in those tough situations versus Portland, where Portland was up 6, I think, with 12 to go or something like that, and we just kind of made some momentum plays and came back in the game. Same thing with LMU. Like they got up big on us. We took back the lead. They came back late, and our guys were able to withstand that and buckle down and get a couple stops. Jan Vide was kind of, he was going to work on us. But our guys built a lot of mental toughness throughout that preseason, and I think that's been a big part of this. And we talked a lot about the start versus LMU and what that looks like, attacking the game and not feeling our way into that anymore. And it was cool to see the guys, apply those lessons and start off better versus Oregon State.
Now, despite like the success and the obviously getting 3-1, jump starting in league play, there's nothing to scoff at about that. That's obviously a great way to be able to get into league play. But looking kind of like deeper into the numbers, the one thing I did kind of notice, like, yeah, you've been plus 26 in the offensive rebounding category, but haven't taken really seems full advantage on that second chance points. Is that kind of something you're kind of focusing on, or how do you kind of like remedy that sort of thing? Because you're getting the chances, you're just not being able to kind of finish those off.
Yeah, the Seattle U game was crazy. I mean, we really just looked frantic out there once we got the offensive rebounds and didn't get into another action or another play where we were just playing one-on-one. And I think that's something where we just got to grow. And we were honestly doing the same thing with our offensive rebounding the whole season. We just weren't getting the offensive rebounds at first, and we were kind of going to our spots, but doing it with the wrong kind of energy. And we took a step in that once conference play started. But now that we're getting those, we need to learn the next lesson, how to finish those, how to score. We should be 1.5 points per possession on offensive rebounds, and we're below 1 right now. It's something that we got to start spraying those out for open threes and getting into an action.
Especially with, again, the games upcoming. Like you have St. Mary's up next and then Gonzaga after that. You talk about that's one of the big keys against teams like that, like being able to have those second chance opportunities, rebound the ball well, because that's what these two teams do exceptionally well. As you're prepping for this week, because the Zags and the Gales present obviously a big challenge there. What's something that you can take from the non-conference against opponents that you've had, like in Arizona State or a USC, that you can apply to games like against these two? Obviously, you're familiar with St. Mary's and Gonzaga through the games last year, and there's a lot of similar personnel from a year ago. But what is there something that you can take from the guys' experience this year to be able to kind of say, hey, we know what this is like, we know what the experience is going to be like against tough teams and tough environments, this is not new to us?
Yeah, I think that was the design behind the preseason is prepare us physically and mentally for playing these teams that can go on big runs. Last year versus St. Mary's, like they kicked our butt on the offensive glass. And that's what they do. Like, and that's something that we've tried to recruit to. That's something that we've been trying to prepare for, is the physicality of this league. And so we'll see. It's going to be a big test for us. And they got some really good players. Morauskas has been going off the last few games, and they got some. They just keep reloading with their guard play, and it's been impressive to watch them this year. And so it's going to be a great challenge for us that hopefully we've prepared for in the preseason with some tough road games, and just going to go out and fight.
Now, one of the challenges that you also do have is that you are going to be without Tomas Thrasterson for the next few weeks with the foot stress fracture that he sustained. We've seen kind of Jerome Moore kind of step into that role a little bit, but what's kind of like, how do you try to replace or supplement what Thrasterson was able to give you?
It's got to be by committee, and that's one of the beauties of our team. I think from the jump, we've had 11 guys that were ready to play this year. Unfortunately, Case got injured, and now with Thomas out, there's a few less, but there's a lot of guys that can play make and knock down shots. Now Thomas was great because he can do a little bit of both. Like, he can post up. He's one of those blur positions that we really use a lot, and so it's going to be Ree and Ace and Simon knocking down more perimeter shots. It's going to be Audrey and Jerome creating more for us inside, and down the line, everyone's just going to have to do their job a little bit better. And it's a good opportunity for some of the other guys.
All right, I'm gonna get you out with one as you head to the Bay Area, make the trip down to California. Is there anywhere that you end up off the court? Is there a spot you have to get to while you're in town?
Yeah, we're gonna hit In and Out every time. That's the go-to.
Absolutely. I almost feel like it's intentional. That's right next to airports. It's like get off the plane, go to In and Out, and
Absolutely. I don't know. Moraga's a little deep from there, so we gotta figure that out.
well, I think there's a couple like out in Concord in that area. There's a couple In and Outs out that way, so they're not too far away from Moraga.
We'll get it done.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dave, for hopping on. Good luck the rest of the season. Washington State off to a 3-1 start in conference play. David, thanks a lot. We'll catch up down the road.
Appreciate it. Go Cougs.
All right. So, I mean, thinking about this Washington State team, because I mean, we had the question marks before as we were coming into conference play because they had a brutal non-conference schedule. And a lot of nights it didn't go their way. And I think there was so much of what we looked at that was kind of hanging the hat on what happened against Idaho, what happened against Chaminade, because those were kind of two outings that really threw up a lot of red flags about what was happening with this team. But now they've seems like they've turned it around a bit, 5-1 in their last 6 games. The one loss is to Seattle U, and it does feel like that the roles are starting to be solidified, that there's seems to be a little bit more continuity with what we're seeing with this Washington State team, and it probably could not have come at a better time for them to start to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think you talk about battle tested, and battle tested can lead you one of two ways. It can either lead you into woe is me, season's over, we're not going to get our at-large bid into the tournament or whatever that may be, whatever your goals were heading into that season, or you find a way to turn that corner and you find a way to continue to rise to the occasion. And while Washington State, maybe they're not playing, the peak to peak of what the WCC has to offer, you still have to take care of who's in front of you. And the Cougs have done that. And I think when you consider some of the close ones that they had, especially in Maui, as David Riley just mentioned, that's what sticks out in terms of, okay, you got to learn how to win. And that, especially with a young team, one where he mentioned he loses his top 6 scorers from last year's squad. That's a process that takes time. And one I know that Washington State fans have been very antsy about. And I totally understand it, especially when you've been having some success in recent memory and even going to the NCAA tournament. So going forward, I think for the Cougs, the couple guys who I kind of want to look at, and I know Ace Glass takes a lot of storylines, and rightfully so. But I'm kind of want to look. ND Okafor has scored at double figures, I believe, in 5 of his last 6 games. I like the controlled aggression he's coming with more than anything. I think that's a noticeable development from last year to this year, and even dating back to his time at Cal. Rehard's Favors, I like because more for his narrative and storyline. Greg Woods from Spokesman Review, who does a great job covering the Cougs, mentioned that Favors' father is visiting from Latvia and can be here for a whole month. So I think just in general, you like to see that kind of like those storylines kind of mesh together and see what Rehard Favors can do kind of on the court, and has been doing some good things as of recent with his dad in the building, including 17 points against LMU, 13 against Portland back in the conference opener there. So kind of what he can do. And I still maintain that Emmanuel Ugbo can have a big role going forward. I know he's kind of had some limited stints, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase, but I maintain that he could be a player that can make a difference and can be a winning basketball player in a close game.
I think we remissed also not to kind of include Emeli Yalaho in that grouping as well. Again, like another guy who's come in, and it's taken some time for this group to gel and figure out what is the best version of this team is going to look like. But we're starting to see signs of it. And I think the game against Oregon State was a much better sign of, like, they just jumped on Oregon State right away, which was, I think, an improvement versus what we saw against LMU and Portland, where they were playing catch up in parts of those games and really had to come back playing on their heels a little bit. But they were sharp from the get-go against Oregon State. And again, a team that they should beat. We talked about like making picks or whatnot the other day, how like Washington State wasn't feeling all too confident, even against the likes of Oregon State, that, hey, it's like, this is you have to handle your business. And they did exactly that against the Beavers. And now the one thing I think we need to kind of talk about, they are 3-1. Great. they are also 3-1 with USF. And there's also been question marks about the Dons as we've kind of gone in, but the fact is they're 3-1. And so of the 3-1 teams, the teams right below the 3 undefeateds, which of these teams does look better? Because I mean, on paper, like, and what we have seen, like, to me, it's clearly Washington State. But is there something that the Dons are doing that might lead you to like think that maybe it's like they're starting to figure it out a little bit as well, or have we had way too many close calls with them even in these first couple weeks?
I'm going to go with Washington State, and I think just because it's one thing to, as we mentioned, you're tied in the records 3-1 in conference, but the manner in which you get there matters even more, at least in my opinion, at least, especially when we do our power rankings and you're having to delineate between the tire fire that is the 5 through 10 slots at times. And at least for me, is USF is kind of just, they've flirted with disaster and even had it at times. I mean, you lose to Oregon State. That's a horrible loss right now. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Oregon State is a bad team right now. And there's really no other way to put that. San Diego, they didn't have Tyler Johnson, and USF eventually squeaks out a 10-point win. Then against Portland, they're down 22-6 at home. Like, I mean, that can't happen. They know that can't happen, and yet it did anyway. And that's part of the dilemma. Like, we know USF is so much better than what they're showing, but they're not doing it. And we're far past the point of theorizing and saying we believe it, we see it on paper. We're in January, Zach. Like, this is, what are you showing me? What are you doing? And at least for me, the Cougs are doing more in terms of cohesiveness within the scope of a game. And for me, at least a tier above in terms of within the 3-1 records.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The manner in which it has happened, like Washington State, I think, has proven more. Now, I will say that of the two teams who has the best win, it's probably USF, because
Yes.
they did go up to Seattle U and won at the Red Hawk Center. So
that's true, but then they immediately give it away at Oregon State.
Right. It's like, again, like there's levels to it. Yes, they have the best win, but they also have the most questionable loss in that record. So it's hard to put a lot of stock in USF right now, even if they are 3-1. They've done what they should do. If you had told most USF folks that they're going to be 3-1 after the first 4 games in league play, they probably would have been thrilled, regardless of how it happened. But this is now they're entering a stretch where they're going to be hitting the road this week. They're going to be at LMU, at Pepperdine. Then they get St. Mary's, and then Washington State, and at Gonzaga, at Santa Clara. Like, this is going to be a tough next couple weeks for USF. They're 3-1 right now, but this could very quickly, with St. Mary's, Gonzaga, and Santa Clara in there, and at LMU again. Like, that's not an easy game either, to have to go down to Gersten Pavilion. There could be 4 losses right there, and that will then quickly move USF back to the middle of the pack, and maybe even the back half of the pack.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is not going to get any easier for USF. And we think about those upcoming games that even settled within it. I mean, the aforementioned Washington State Cougars, like, they're no pushover whatsoever. And I not that I expect them to lose this game, but at some point, I think Pepperdine's going to get sick of losing at some point. And again, I'm not sitting here predicting Pepperdine's beating USF. Like, please do not mistake that. But like, for any team going into Firestone, like, this is their last season out there. They're not off to the start that they want. They want to have some momentum ushering in this new facility down in Malibu. Somebody's got to lose to them. And you just have to hope that you're not the team that gets bitten by that. And if I'm USF, got to be on your P's and Q's at all times. So, I mean, we talked about how spunky Portland can be in the matchup against the Dons. And what do? And they go out, race out to a big lead. USF has to storm back and claw back and find a way. So USF, I mean, the way I look at it, their schedule, it's a bunch of landmines right now. And you got to hope that you don't activate a lot of them.
And that does kind of take us into Thursday, because we do have our regular Thursday, Saturday slated for the WCC this week. Next week, we'll get a little bit wacky because we do have games essentially every day next week. But with 5 games on Thursday, 5 games on Saturday, we got a kind of a lot to kind of chew on. And obviously, like, the game we're going to be focused on is Santa Clara at Gonzaga. And this game is going to be, I think it's going to say a lot, I think, about Santa Clara. Again, almost kind of similar to Seattle U, where it's not necessarily that Santa Clara has to go in and win. They have to go in and prove that they can hang with the Zags again. And yes, it feels like that's something that every team seems to have to be able to prove every single year. And Santa Clara did go into that building and win a year ago, and then paid for it when they got back to Levy Center. But
yeah,
this is still a team that is capable of beating anybody. And can they go in there and get a win? Yes. Will they this week in this scenario? I think that's going to be the challenge with Santa Clara, or sorry, with Gonzaga really coming off a win where they look like they were well more focused than they were had you maybe caught them a full week ago.
Yeah, and last year, and you guys will get some lore about last year that I told Zach before we started recording. So once Santa Clara won the game in Spokane last year, in some world, how I ended up at this conclusion, and I guess I almost ended up being right before the Ismaila Diani adjustment. I walked into the Levy Center last February, and I was expecting Santa Clara to beat Gonzaga. Like, why is that? It seems so outlandish. Yet that was the full on. That was the expectation for me walking, and they get up 11 points. Graham Ike's in foul trouble. Braden Huff's in foul trouble. Enter Ismaila Diani. Whole game changes, so on and so forth. Obviously, two new different rosters across the board for the Zags and the Broncos this year. I don't see the matchup as fortuitous this year for Santa Clara. I think the one thing that sticks out is the front court depth, and Broncos have so many guys who are down and have been down. It's like Chris Tajo, that was a guy from Iowa who they were expecting to have to play and play bulk minutes. He has not played, is out for the season. Third string center Francis Chukwu-Debel I believe dislocated his finger. So I don't believe he's going to be suiting up in this game. And the reason why I amplify those two names is because Buki Aboye and Alan Graves, while productive players, while Santa Clara has a really good offensive rating, I believe almost in the 130s, I believe, with Buki Aboye on the floor, he actually has to be on the floor because they foul a lot. Aboye has fouled out in 5 games already this season. Alan Graves, he's also been in foul trouble quite a bit. So what does that mean? Well, I expect Graham Ike to go to work. I can expect Braden Huff to go to work. You can't stop both of them. And if anything, you might just let them do what they do and see what the Seattle U Redhawks did and try and cut off the water to everybody else. But what happens when you have Buki Aboye with 2 first-half fouls? Alan Graves comes in, he picks up 2 first-half fouls. So then who's your backup? Then who's your third string 5? Is it Jake Ensminger versus the world? Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea what Herb Sendek and co can really do at that point if Chukwu-Debel is saddled on the bench. And that, for me, is really the biggest pain point. I think Gonzaga, especially if it's not even exclusive to the bigs, like if Tylen Grant-Foster can get downhill, and the Broncos have struggled with point of attack defense quite a bit this season, that's going to be a recipe for a bad time. The activity of Jalen Worley, that could be a recipe for a bad time. And I'm not going to sit here and predict a blowout or anything like that. In fact, I don't even think I'll throw out a score prediction. But just in general, when I look at some of the flow and some of the things that can go wrong for the Broncos, that's what sticks out to me. And conversely, for the Zags, I think you have to find a way to cut off those 3-pointers that really doomed them last year to the tune of 103 points. And the reason why you can't just bank on Santa Clara missing shots, which is the big thing, because at least for me, sometimes even though I get frustrated with their shooting because they shoot 46% of their total shots from 3, but they only make 32% of them. So you can see you have long droughts. We also have some heat checks. So what version of the Broncos show up last year is the heat checks? Does someone go for 35 like Tyree Bryan did? Maybe it's Elijah Mahi. Who knows? But just in general, the way the process works, that's kind of where I stand on both sides of the aisle. What version of Gonzaga comes out mentally? Can they stop the 3? And for the Broncos, can they sustain and try and fight back against some potential tidal waves?
35.9. I think Christian Hammond on line 2 for that one. Possibly.
Yeah, that could happen. That could happen.
But yeah, I the front court is a problem here. But I think this is going to be more about the Zags than it is about the Broncos going into this one, because they played with fire a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and clearly the message got through against LMU that this is not acceptable anymore, that the defense locked back in. And I think that, again, the difference between the team last year, the Zags team last year and this year, is that defense. the Zag team last year was not that good of a defensive team. They had ran into foul trouble as well. Graham Ike was a lot of times in foul trouble himself, and prevented himself from being in a lot of games. And because we saw Gonzaga's adjustment for that second matchup, you could imagine that if things do start to kind of go sideways in any sort of way, especially on the interior, there might be the quick call to Diani again, because he is still sitting down there on the end of that bench, to try to replicate what they were able to do a year ago. So I don't expect the Santa Clara to go in there and necessarily get the win, but like if they can shoot the three well, they're going to stand a chance at least to be in it toward the end. I don't know if that means they're going to have to hit 15 plus threes to stay in this game. And of course, we know they're fully capable of doing it. This is a high powered Santa Clara offense, and they could very well go off for 15, 17, maybe not 23 threes, which is what we've seen them do in the past, but like getting into the mid teens, high teens, very possible for this group. And if they can do that, they're going to definitely be in this contest. But now looking at some of the others that we have the rest of on Thursday, Pepperdine at San Diego, Pacific at Portland, Seattle U, Oregon State, USF at LMU. I mean, I think it's Pacific at Portland, because I think it's Pacific needed to kind of get off the mat a little bit and have a feel good game. And that felt a little bit more like what they got against Pepperdine on Saturday. Even though they weren't able to really pull away, that looked more like the Pacific team that I think that they want to see, more so than the one that we saw that couldn't get it done against LMU.
And wait, hold on. And think of the fact right before then that they just boat raced Oregon State out of the Spanos Center. So I think when you look at it, a consistent week more than anything stands out, but go right ahead.
Yeah. They needed some level of consistency. Now going up to Portland is going to be a tough task. This is a team that I think now the scouting report's kind of out. It's like slow down Elias Ralph. Like that's key number one on the Pacific scouting report, to slow him down, because that might just solve all your problems. But we've seen Portland has gotten off to some really good starts recently. We talked about how they jumped out on USF. They were actually kind of hanging around with St. Mary's, at least for a while, before it all went south, which is kind of typical for that matchup. But Portland was also in it with Santa Clara at the Child Center. They have shown that they are going to be competitive in these games. We have just been kind of waiting for Portland to put it all together. And so that's why this matchup is going to be fascinating, because Pacific looks like they're a little bit more consistent, but like we talk about Pepperdine kind of being hungry for that first win. Portland's got to be starving for that first win because of the way they've played. Like all records are not equal to each other. Both Pepperdine and Portland are 0-4, but I would not put Portland in the same category as Pepperdine at all right now, because Portland has played much better over those course of those 4 games than Pepperdine has. And it feels like we're just kind of like waiting for that opportunity that Portland's going to finally kind of knock the door down and get a win. And I don't know if that's going to come again on Thursday against Pacific, or they do have Oregon State coming in on Saturday. So it could also end up being that game where Portland finally kind of crashes through the wall. But this one, I think, is going to be I think it's going to be testy. I think it's going to be pretty gritty at the Child Center between these two, because both these teams are going to, I think, be hungry for a win.
Yeah, and I think you look at what Pacific has done. Like Pacific, they need to come with the mentality that they need to take care of business and not just assume, okay, it's Portland. No, we have to look at ourselves, because they lost the opener at San Diego, and San Diego obviously is not a beacon of success so far in this young WCC season. And I think going forward, you look at what Portland has done, and I think it was you who mentioned it. They're one Timo George injury away from potentially being 3-1 in conference right now. And I don't think that's too much of a stretch to say. And I know Pilots fans have really been adamant about that, and I totally understand that argument. So for me, I think it's fork in the road territory, and I think that's one of 2 fork in the road territory type games, at least on the Thursday slate. And the other one for me is USF at LMU. LMU obviously did not have a great time in the Pacific Northwest, lost a heartbreaker to the Cougs, and then got maced by the Bulldogs. they need to get right immediately. And like now you pretty much have your full complement of players for the most part. And USF, they want to make sure that they can really stay afoot and try and be within reach of the top four, including Santa Clara and Seattle U. So for me, it's fork in the road territory for both of those teams and trying to figure out what's going to happen before a national TV crowd.
All right. LMU, like their next couple games, this week is going to be tough because it's both USF and then at Santa Clara. After that, it might get a little easier with, again, like they get Portland, at Seattle U, Oregon State, but the softer end of their schedule really isn't going to come until later in the season. So LMU's kind of really got to be on top of it from the get-go. The one benefit that LMU does have at the very least is that they only have to see Gonzaga once, and they only have to see St. Mary's once. So they won't have to go through the full gauntlet of having to see the top two teams repeatedly. And they will have to get right and be able to handle their business against everybody else, which I think they're in better position. I feel more confident about them being able to do that this year than I would have been a year ago with this group. We've seen some really good performances. And again, like whether it be Jan Vita, who's had 28 against Washington State, or MJ Amy, who we know we can go off, Rodney Brown. Like there's a lot more weapons that this team can utilize and be able to fall back on than the team a year ago. Last year, like it really was a struggle to kind of find who the offensive weapons were going to be on that squad. So this year, at least like there's more to kind of to chew on. But you're right, like this matchup with USF and LMU can kind of be a launching off point. I mean, if USF goes down and gets a win against the Lions, like now they're staring at 4-1. And yeah, like we talked about, they're kind of in the middle of a tough stretch. Their St. Mary's is coming up, Gonzaga, Santa Clara, all coming up. But if they can get the win against LMU at LMU, at least they're going to start feeling a little bit more confident about themselves as they go into what is probably the toughest stretch of the conference season for them.
Yeah, and I think you look at everything else is we've been waiting for them to take that next step for, I want to say, at least 3 years now. And for LMU, it's what can you show me? And St. Mary's, you showed me a lot of good. You didn't get the win. Gonzaga, you got off to a good start, and then nothing successful after that. USF, that's one where you can sort of try and reestablish yourself as graduating into the next year. You're kind of away from where the parity happens and everybody beats everybody, and try and graduate into the tier of Santa Clara, USF, Seattle U. So I think this is a game where that can provide that type of opportunity. I think USF, I think the at-large is dead, to be quite honest. Like, I don't think that's too much of an exaggeration to say, but they need to realize it's okay. Now you're fighting for seeding. And I know it's only January, but you got to continue to keep up this 3-1 start. And against LMU, that will help you. It'll serve you later if you take care of business now.
Position yourself best you can to not have to face Gonzaga earlier or St. Mary's earlier, whichever one you prefer not to see earlier rather than later. Of course, like that's going to just be a crapshoot because, I mean, at this stage of like St. Mary's and Gonzaga don't play each other for another few weeks. And the St. Mary's team by then could be a much more polished team by the time they see the Zags, which I think will be a fun watch when we get to that one toward the end of January. All right. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod. That's Thomas. I'm Zach. We will be back for an Unofficial WCC Live Saturday morning to kick off the Saturday slate of games. And you'll catch that on YouTube and Twitch. So, all right, one more time for Thomas. I'm Zach. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.